So I know how I'd save Doctor Who. First off, my thing is, I don't think Westy destroyed Doctor Who. And I think he's onto something. I don't think Susan should be half human, though. I'd rather believe that Susan just is the Doctor's granddaughter. I'm open to the idea of her being adopted. Like, that's fair in the interest of inclusion, and inclusion is important. But also, I would just like to believe that, like, there isn't some weird timey-wiminess to it. She's in the anchor to the Doctor. Like, the Doctor has this humanity to him. He wasn't always a big cosmic entity. At one point he was just a guy. And Susan is kind of like an anchor to that part of himself and to his origins and who he was originally. But also, I think I think trying to make Susan half human and trying to find Susan and everything, I'm okay with the idea of the Doctor finding Susan, but like I think it's important to be clear on what ITD was trying to do. I think when Doctor Who came back, there was this running theme of the Time War. The Time War gave context to the Doctor. It gave, I don't know, this sort of impetus. You know, it gave a mission, it gave a story arc. It's just, I think we need something similar to the Time War now. And I think what ITD was trying to make the search for Susan there, and I think that's interesting. But also I think he was trying to make the Pantheon that as well. So, but I think we need something a lot more strongly connected to the Doctor, something better defined, not some big mystery, something dynamic. I think the Doctor. I think it would be interesting if the Master or Romana came up one day and said, Doctor, humanity is going to become a threat. The Matrix told me that humanity is going to become a bigger threat than even the Daleks. Originally, that wasn't the case, but you did something. And I'm going to give you a year to figure this out, or I will kill them all. It's up to you, Doctor. But then, as the season goes on, we find out that Romana is part of one faction of the Time Lords. There's a competing faction led by Susan. See, after the Time War, Gallifrey became unstable, right? Like, time is supposed to be anchored to Gallifrey. Gallifrey keeps time stable. You know, like, this is me just making some ideas or whatever, just doing canon welding. But in my idea, in my thinking, the reason why you have fixed points is because of the Time Lords. They created the fixed points. Before the Time Lords, there was no such thing as fixed points, and history was crazy and chaotic, and anything could happen. But because of Gallifrey, because of the anchoring of the thread and everything, because time's anchored during Gallifrey, time is stable. Which means that if the Time Lords want to come back, they need to stabilize time again. But Gallifrey can't do that. The Time War damaged Gallifrey's relationship to the universe. That's why it keeps dying in the main series. So the only way to stabilize everything is to make a new anchor. So they decide to anchor the universe to anchor time on Earth. They have to anchor a time to Earth because the Doctor has stabilized Earth. Because of the Doctor's relationship to Earth, Earth is the only place in the universe that's now stable. So the Time Lords decide that they're going to make it the new Gallifrey, right? But in order for them to anchor a time to Earth, they need someone related to Earth. So then they find Susan and then link it to her. Right? I'm not trying to say Susan is half human, but Susan has the strongest relationship to Gallifrey outside of the Doctor, which means that she's the best person to link time to. But because of that, because the universe is anchored to Susan, she is the new Wazaline. She is the new Lord President. And Womana is completely fine with this. Womana never really wanted to be Lord President to begin with. She mostly did it just to counteract the chaotic forces on Gallifrey right around the time the Time War was starting to happen and the Daleks were first starting to invade. Womana never wanted the job. But then, once the Matrix makes it clear that humanity is going to become a threat, Womana feels like she has to act. Womana starts to get into a fight with Susan, and as a direct result, Womana goes rogue and goes to find the Doctor. Susan feels like the Doctor shouldn't know about all of this. He should not know that the Time Lords are on Earth. Womana doesn't tell the Doctor, but Susan doesn't want to risk that. Also, Susan doesn't agree with Womana on what should be done to humanity. Susan wants humanity to try to find its own way because she has faith humanity will find its own way. The Doctor already had faith in humanity. So Susan has faith in humanity. But Womana, over time, just... the Time War, the return of Wazaline, trying to survive, it's just made her lose faith in all of it. So yeah, I think that would be a great new direction for the show. And it would be interesting if the Doctor is put into a position where they have to get into fights with humanity, because the Doctor starts to see hints of how humanity starts to lose its way. And this is where you start to introduce the Minister of War, and you bring back that guy from 73 Yards, and you start to see how humanity just starts to become more chaotic over time. And the Doctor gets challenged and has to decide, am I going to do something about this? And, Susan comes up now and again to try to help him figure it out. And maybe there's this climax between Womana, the Doctor, and Susan, and maybe even Leela and Ace come in or whatever.